I caught my husband texting my daughter. Not our daughter, my daughter. She was mine long before he came into this house, long before he learned how to say family with a straight face. At first, I thought I misread the name. You know how phone screens light up, quick, bright, cruel. But there it was, her name, her photo, and his message. Don't tell your mother yet, she wouldn't understand. The room went still. My tea cooled in my hand, untouched. My heart didn't race. It folded, quietly, neatly, the way pain does when it's been waiting its turn. I didn't confront him that night. No shouting, no slaps, no scenes. I simply watched. Because a woman like me doesn't start wars. She collects evidence until the battle declares itself. The next morning, he kissed me on the forehead, the same lips that had sent that message. "Don't wait up tonight," he said. I smiled, slow. "Of course not," I whispered. He didn't notice I was holding his phone. By noon, I knew everything. The times, the photos, the tone. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't innocent either. It was something darker, something secret. And it wasn't just between them, because as I read deeper, I realized they weren't hiding from me. They were hiding someone else. That's when the shaking started. Not in my hands, in my trust. Stay till the end. You'll see why finding those messages didn't break me. It built me. You can always tell when a home starts keeping secrets. It gets quieter, but the silence feels busy. That week, the walls of my house were listening. I could feel it. The tension tucked between footsteps, the cautious laughter from the next room, the pause before every "Good night, Mom." My husband Leonard had become unusually kind, too kind. He'd started cooking breakfast, something he hadn't done since the honeymoon phase years ago. He'd hum while buttering toast, kiss my cheek on his way out, even leave little notes like, "You're my peace, May." Peace? Men only call you peace when they've found their chaos elsewhere. My daughter, Raina, 22, was home from college for the summer. Bright, restless, half woman, half storm. She'd been quiet lately, too. No late-night calls, no laughter spilling down the hall. Just the occasional glance my way, long and unreadable. When I'd ask if she was all right, she'd shrug. "Just tired, Mom." But her tired had nothing to do with sleep. I watched them both from behind the rhythm of ordinary life. Breakfast dishes, work emails, folded laundry, the rituals that keep women from falling apart. One night, I heard them in the kitchen, not arguing, not laughing, just whispering, like people who know they shouldn't be talking at all. I stood by the doorway, half in shadow. Rena said softly, "She's going to find out, Leonard." And he replied, low, "Not if you follow the plan." The plan. The word sat in my chest like a splinter. I could have walked in right then. I could have ended it. But no. Women like me don't interrupt their own betrayal. We let it play long enough to learn the whole tune. The next morning, I acted normal. I asked about dinner, weather, Rena's classes. Leonard smiled too easily. Rena barely met my eyes. I was living in a theater, and everyone but me had a script. That afternoon, I went upstairs to make the bed. His phone was charging on the nightstand, unlocked. He never left it unlocked. For a moment, I stood there, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, the calm before trespass. Then I picked it up. No new messages. He'd cleaned his history. But not his photos. There were pictures of my daughter, not indecent, but intimate. Her smile too private, her eyes too familiar, selfies she'd sent someone, not her mother. One caption read, "Don't forget what you promised." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spin slow circles above my bed. I thought of every kindness Leonard had ever shown me. Every time he'd said, "You're overthinking it." Every time he'd made me doubt what my own eyes could see. Rena wasn't a child, and Leonard wasn't a fool. Whatever this was, it wasn't love. It was leverage. The next day, I went to my friend Gloria's boutique downtown. She's the kind of woman who knows things before they're said. When I walked in, she took one look at my face and said, "So it's finally happening?" I smiled faintly. "What's that?" "The day you stop pretending you don't already know." Over coffee in the back room, I told her everything. The texts, the photos, the whispers. She didn't gasp or pity me. She just nodded slowly and said, "Don't confront, observe. Let them hang themselves with their own silence." So I did. That night, I cooked dinner like always. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, collard greens, Leonard's favorites. Rena joined us, eyes down. Halfway through the meal, Leonard looked at her and said, "We'll talk later, right?" It was so casual, so careless. He didn't even see the way I froze, but Rena did. And that's when she looked up. And for the first time, I saw fear. I smiled at her, slow, motherly. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" She nodded too fast. "Yeah, Mom, just tired." That word again. Tired. The word women use when they're lying but can't find the energy to perform the truth. After dinner, I poured myself a drink, stood at the kitchen sink, and watched their reflections in the window. They weren't touching. But guilt doesn't need contact. It glows all on its own. I thought about all the things I'd forgiven before, the small lies, the absences, the silences. But this was different. This was betrayal that lived under my roof, betrayal that wore my last name. I set the glass down, steady. The night had finally chosen sides, and so had I. That's when I realized I wasn't heartbroken. I was ready. It's strange how a lie makes a home heavier. You start moving slower, listening harder, pretending louder. The first fracture didn't come from something big. It came from a smell. Lilac perfume. Not mine. Too young, too sweet, too new. It lingered on Leonard's shirt one morning as he left for an early meeting. I folded that shirt later, slowly, the way I fold truths that haven't ripened yet. And when I leaned closer, I knew. It wasn't from any store he'd ever bought me gifts from. That was the morning I started watching. Every detail became a breadcrumb. The late-night calls, the half-smile when his phone buzzed, the way Rena would glance up at him and look away too quickly, like a secret had brushed between them. They thought they were careful. They thought I was old, distracted, harmless. But a woman who has survived childbirth, heartbreak, and rent payments knows how to study silence. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that sounds staged. Then I heard voices upstairs. Soft, nervous. I walked halfway up the stairs and stopped when I heard my name. "Mom can't find out," Rena whispered. Leonard said, "She won't. Just keep calm, baby. We're almost through this." Baby. That one word carved through me like glass, not because of what it meant, but because of how easily he said it. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, hand on the banister until my fingers went cold. When I finally walked back down, my reflection in the hallway mirror looked like someone else, someone who'd been underestimated for too long. That night, I didn't confront them. I made dinner again. Roast chicken, lemon glaze, his favorite. I set the table with my mother's china, the one I only used for special occasions. And when they both sat down, I smiled. "Special dinner," I said lightly. "I just felt like celebrating something." Leonard chuckled. "What's the occasion?" I looked right at him. Clarity. He didn't understand, of course. Men never do until it's too late. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the kitchen. Rena followed, hesitant. "Mom, you okay?" she asked softly. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, pouring myself wine. "You look pale. Something on your mind?" She shook her head, too fast. "No, just tired." There it was again. That word. I could have screamed. Instead, I smiled. Later that night, I found Leonard's phone hidden under the couch cushion, unlocked again. sloppy this time. There was a message thread titled R. The newest message was from him. Tomorrow night, we'll finally tell her. Tell her what? Tell me what? The next morning, Rena was gone before I woke up. Leonard left an hour later, claiming another client meeting. But he wasn't a man who had clients. He was a man who had secrets. So I followed him. He drove to the edge of town, that quiet cafe where people go when they want to be unseen. I parked 2 blocks away, waited. After a few minutes, Rena arrived. She sat across from him. They didn't touch, but their faces were too close, their voices too low. I didn't need to hear them. I just needed to see. That evening, when they returned home separately, I greeted them both with calm. Rena said she'd been shopping. Leonard said his meeting ran late, and I said, of course it did. That was the first time they looked at each other, quick, nervous, and I saw it. The guilt, the fear, the unraveling. People think betrayal shatters you, but for women like me, betrayal sharpens you. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine, looked out the window, and whispered, tomorrow I start digging. Because I already knew. This wasn't just about lust or lies. It was about control. And they were about to learn what happens when you play games in a house built by a woman who's already lost everything once before. That's when I started watching. And when I stopped forgiving. The day I decided to stop feeling was the first day I truly started seeing. It's a strange power, emotional distance. It doesn't numb you, it sharpens you. When you stop begging for answers, the lies start confessing themselves. I began noticing their patterns. Leonard's laughter became louder, forced, like it was trying to cover up his thoughts. Rena's silence, on the other hand, deepened. Not guilt, but calculation. They spoke less around me, but more through glances. Glances that carried full conversations I wasn't invited to hear. I let them think I was slipping. I let my smile stretch too long. My questions sound innocent, because there's no better disguise than the one people put on you. At breakfast, I poured tea the same way every morning. Slow, steady, 1 spoon of honey. But now, I listened to the rhythm of their spoons, the tremor in their hands. Leonard's cup always rattled against the saucer when he lied. That's how I kept time, by the sound of deceit in my own kitchen. I started folding his shirts with more care than he deserved. Crisp creases, sharp lines, perfect symmetry. Because the act of tidying a man's clothes becomes poetry when you know his soul's a mess. Every movement became symbolic, calm hands masking fury. Even the way I set the dinner table carried intention, his fork on the left, hers on the right, a quiet separation before the war. One evening, I heard her in her room, crying softly. Rena never cried, not even as a child. I stood by her door, listening, not to comfort her, but to understand what kind of tears they were. Regret? Fear? Love? But they were silent tears. The kind that means survival, not sorrow. When she came out, her face was clean, her eyes dry. Everything all right, sweetheart? Yes. Mom, she said, I'm fine. I smiled. Of course you are. Because I knew fine was another word for fake. Leonard, meanwhile, had grown careless. One night, he forgot to sign out of his laptop. Emails open, drafts unsent, all addressed to one name, Rena. But what caught me wasn't the content. It was the subject line of one, the transfer, final version. It wasn't love, it was money. The affair, or whatever it was, wasn't romantic. It was strategic. He was manipulating her, using her access to something. And she, blinded by loyalty or desperation, was letting him. I didn't confront either of them. I let them believe I was the fool in the room, because fools are the freest observers. Over the next few days, I started reclaiming my space, quietly, symbolically. I changed the locks on my study. I withdrew access from our joint bank accounts. I even started recording conversations. not to expose them yet, but to remind myself how far they'd gone. Every word, every whisper, every half-truth. I captured it all, like gathering raindrops before a flood. Then one night, while they thought I was asleep, I heard them again. The same hushed urgency. Rena said, "She'll find out soon, Leonard." And he replied, "Then we move fast. She won't survive another shock." Survive. That word. They weren't planning to leave me. They were planning to break me. I sat in the dark, hands still, breath shallow. And in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just realized the daughter I raised and the man I married were about to learn what happens when you mistake softness for surrender. The next morning, I poured tea again. Same cup, same ritual. Only this time, the sugar was measured with purpose, because distance wasn't enough anymore. The time had come to move from watching to acting. The truth didn't come to me in one blow. It came in fragments, like glass scattered across a floor, reflecting different angles of the same lie. It was a Thursday. The air smelled of rain and something electric, like the universe was holding its breath. Leonard was in his office, door closed. Rena had gone out early. The house was quiet again. Too quiet, the kind that hides breathing. When I passed by his office, I heard the faint hum of his printer. A single sheet of paper slid out, then another. Curiosity isn't what led me in. Instinct did. The kind mothers are born with. The kind wives develop as armor. On the desk sat a stack of documents, financial statements, authorization forms, and one email printout that made my pulse shift. It was from my daughter's university addressed to Leonard. Subject, Revised Beneficiary Access, Parental Authorization Attached. My name was on the signature line. Forged. I picked up the page, tracing my own counterfeit handwriting. I'd signed 1,000 checks, 100 permission slips, but never this. They'd changed Rena's account, her scholarship funds, her investments, the savings I'd set up in her name, all redirected to a joint account under Leonard's control. My husband, my daughter, partners in theft. But betrayal doesn't always come with screaming. Sometimes it arrives with neat margins and official stamps. I placed the papers back exactly as I found them, then checked his laptop. This time he'd locked it. Progress. So, I went to the one person who'd never failed me, Gloria. Her shop was closed that afternoon, but she let me in through the back. When I showed her the document, she didn't gasp. She just said, "Baby, this ain't love. This is laundering with lace curtains." I almost laughed. Almost. She helped me copy every file, scans, photos, account numbers, onto a flash drive. Then she looked at me long and said, "May, whatever you're planning, don't let them see you coming." "I won't," I said. "I want them to believe I'm still blind." That evening, I cooked dinner again. Simple stew, cornbread, sweet tea. Rena was late. Leonard was distant. The table between us might as well have been a courtroom. He said, "You've been quiet lately." "I've been thinking," I replied, stirring my tea. "About what?" "Patterns." He froze for a second. Small but visible. Then he chuckled, forced. "You always overanalyze, May." "I know," I said sweetly. "That's what keeps me alive." Later that night, I pretended to go to bed early. From the crack beneath my door, I saw their shadows moving down the hall, whispering again, always whispering. I waited until the front door closed, then I followed. They met at the same cafe. I stayed in my car, watching through the rain. This time, though, something was different. There was a third person, a man in a suit, mid-40s, serious face. He handed Leonard a folder. Rena sat beside him, pale, tense. When Leonard opened the folder, I caught a glimpse of my own name on the first page. He smiled. She didn't. I recorded everything. Phone angled low, rain tapping like an audience. After they left, I waited until the cafe lights dimmed, then walked in. The same waitress was cleaning tables. "Excuse me," I said softly. "The man who was sitting here, he left a folder. Could you check?" She frowned, looked around, then handed me a single page that must have slipped out. It was enough. A printed statement. Transfer of property. Pending signature of May L. Whitaker. They weren't just stealing money. They were trying to take my house, the house I built after my first husband died, the house I bought cash, brick by brick, with the insurance money that was supposed to give Raina stability. And now, they were using my love as leverage. I drove home in silence. When I entered, the smell of their perfume and cologne still lingered in the air. Betrayal's aftertaste. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. If they wanted to take what was mine, they'd have to learn who taught them how to play. The next day, I contacted an old friend, Curtis, a lawyer who owed me more favors than he liked to admit. May Whitaker, he said, what trouble are you stirring now? Just a little spring cleaning, I replied. I need to update my will, transfer some titles, and revoke a few authorizations. He laughed. Leonard finally pushed too far, didn't he? Let's just say, I said, he's about to learn what honesty costs when you fake my signature. For the next 48 hours, I worked quietly. Every signature corrected, every file duplicated, every legal trap reversed. And when I was done, I made one final call. To Detective Rowan, the same officer who'd once helped me with Leonard's first business fraud years ago. I emailed him everything. The forged documents, the recordings, the transfer attempts. He called within the hour. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, this is serious. You want to press charges? Not yet, I replied. Let them hand me the rope themselves. That night, I waited. They came home late, whispering again. Laughter this time. The sound of people who think they've won. I met them in the hallway, smile polite, robe wrapped tight. How was your evening? I asked. Leonard said, productive. Raina looked away. Good, I said, turning toward the stairs. I like when family stays busy. My voice didn't shake, because the game was already over. They just didn't know it yet. The strange thing about uncovering lies is how quiet it feels once you know. You expect thunder. You get stillness. After that night, I moved like smoke, unseen but everywhere. I didn't need to snoop anymore. I just let them talk. People who lie always over-explain. People with guilt can't stand silence. I began tracking everything, times, calls, glances. Raina would leave the house at 2:15 p.m. every Thursday claiming she was meeting a friend. Leonard's phone would go dark at the same hour, different cars, same destination. But something about her pattern was off. She wasn't dressing up for a man. She was dressing down. Plain jeans, hoodies, caps, the kind of disguise you wear when you don't want to be remembered. So I followed her again. And what I found changed everything. She wasn't meeting Leonard that day. She was meeting the man from the cafe, the one who'd handed Leonard the folder. Only this time she wasn't nervous. She was angry. I watched from across the street, camera steady. Her words were sharp, cutting through the air. You said it would be clean, she hissed. You said she'd never know. The man, David, I learned later, replied, she won't unless you mess up. You got greedy, Raina. You wanted too much, too fast. So it wasn't love between her and Leonard. It was leverage. She'd seduced him for control, the same way he'd manipulated me. A circle of deceit with my home at its center. I should have felt broken. Instead, I felt alive. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't the fool in the story. I was the narrator. That evening, I sat in my study, the room they both thought I never used anymore. I opened my notebook and began mapping everything out. Names, dates, amounts, motives. Every thread of their little empire connected to one point. Me. My money. My name. My house. And if they wanted to build their deceit on my foundation, then they'd collapse exactly where they stood. I started preparing the performance. It had to look natural, effortless. Revenge only works when it looks like mercy. So I invited them both to dinner the next Sunday. Raina hesitated. Leonard didn't. Finally, he said, smiling. A normal night again. Yes, I said softly. Normal. I cooked everything from scratch, the way I used to when Love still lived here. Baked chicken, buttered corn, mashed potatoes, peach cobbler cooling on the counter, a perfect picture of warmth. When they arrived, I welcomed them like nothing had changed. We laughed, we ate, we played the same family we used to be. But beneath the table, my phone was recording. Halfway through the meal, I said casually, "Rena, I found something odd in the mail yesterday, a property transfer notice. Do you know anything about that?" Her fork paused mid-air. Leonard's eyes darted to hers. "Mail gets mixed up all the time," he said quickly. I replied, taking a sip of tea. Strange coincidence, though. My name was on it. The silence that followed was symphonic. Rena tried to recover. "Maybe it's old paperwork. Maybe," I said. "But it had today's date." I smiled. A calm smile, the kind that makes guilty people confess just to end the quiet. Leonard shifted in his seat. "May, if you're accusing us of something—" "I'm not accusing," I interrupted gently. "I'm observing." I stood slowly, gathered their empty plates, and carried them to the sink. The sound of porcelain against water filled the space they refused to fill with truth. Behind me, they whispered. Too low for normal ears, but my recorder caught every word. When they finally left that night, the house sighed, like it was relieved to see them go. I replayed the recording 3 times. Their voices were clear. Leonard saying, "She's catching on." Rena replying, "Then we finish this before she ruins everything." That was my proof. Not for the police, not yet. For myself, because I'd just crossed from suspicion to certainty. From that day on, I didn't just act calm, I became it. Calm is the weapon they never see coming. Every move I made was deliberate. Every glance, every pause, every silence, a trap being set. And as I tucked that flash drive under the lining of my jewelry box, I whispered to my reflection, "They think they're writing my ending. They don't realize I'm already editing theirs." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months, because peace isn't the absence of war. It's the moment before you strike back. It started with a name I didn't recognize. Not Leonard, not Rena. A name buried in one of the bank transfers, D. Ellison. It wasn't the name itself. It was the frequency. Every major transfer over the last 6 months passed through his account before landing in theirs. When I looked deeper, I found the address. Not a home, an office. Ellison and Pierce Consulting. A consulting firm Leonard had supposedly dissolved 3 years ago. That's when I realized he never dissolved it. He'd simply changed the ownership to Rena's alias. I felt the air leave my body for a second. Not pain, just recognition. The kind that settles deep in your bones when truth walks in, uninvited but undeniable. They'd used her name as a cover. My daughter's innocence as camouflage for his greed. My husband's cunning as validation for her betrayal. And together they'd built an empire out of my trust. But even empires crumble, especially when their architect learns the blueprint. I printed every document, every email, every payment trail. I laid them across the dining table, the same table where they used to eat, laugh, whisper. Now it was their altar. When Rena walked in that evening, her face changed color. "Mom, what's all this?" "Your homework," I said softly. "Sit." She hesitated. I said sit. The tone wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Mothers don't need volume when they have truth. She sat. Her eyes darted across the papers. I watched her lips move as she read her own undoing. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "Oh, I'm sure it isn't," I replied. "You're not capable of simple mistakes, Rena. Only complicated betrayals." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I poured tea. Jasmine, as always. The sound of the liquid hitting the cup filled the silence between us, a quiet rhythm of consequence. "Mom, please." she said finally, her voice shaking. He made me do it. Ah, there it was. The old song, the helpless duet of guilt and cowardice. "Leonard?" I asked. She nodded quickly, tears pooling but not falling. "He said we'd lose everything if I didn't help. He said a lot of things," I interrupted. "And you believed him. Because that's easier than believing you're just like him." The front door opened then, Leonard's footsteps, heavy, confident, until he saw what waited for him. "May," he said slowly, "what's going on here?" "An audit," I replied, "a family one." He glanced at the papers, then at me. "You shouldn't be digging into things you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You forged my signature. You used my daughter's name to cover your tracks. And now you both sit here, acting like victims when you're just poor actors caught mid-performance." Rena started crying. Too loud, too sudden. Leonard snapped, "Stop crying, you're making it worse." I smiled faintly. "On the contrary, the noise helps me think." I turned to him, calm as marble. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" He smirked. "You always were too sentimental to survive the real world, May." "Funny," I said. "The sentimental one is the only one not facing prison." His jaw tightened. "You wouldn't?" "Wouldn't what?" "Protect what's mine." He took a step closer. "You can't prove anything." I reached into my robe pocket and placed the small flash drive on the table. "I can prove everything." He looked down at it, that tiny piece of plastic that held his whole downfall. I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the kind of fear that smells like sweat and regret. Then, softly, I said, "I sent copies to Detective Rowan this morning. He'll be here soon." The clock ticked once, twice, and then the panic began to bloom behind their calm. Rena whispered, "Mom, please don't—" "I'm not your mother tonight," I said. "I'm the woman you tried to erase." Leonard's voice dropped to a low growl. "You'll destroy your own family for this?" "You destroyed it," I said. "I'm just sweeping the ashes into the right corners." He laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "It makes me free." The doorbell rang, 3 sharp knocks. Rena flinched. Leonard froze. I didn't move. "Go on," I said softly. "Open it." He didn't. So I did. Detective Rowan stood there, hat in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Whitaker." "Evening, Detective. You remember my husband, Leonard?" "Of course," he said, his tone colder. "We've met." Behind me, Rena whispered, "You called the police." I turned to her slowly. "No, dear, I called the truth." Rowan stepped in, took the folder I'd prepared, and glanced through the documents. "Everything checks out," he said. "We've got the forgeries, the transfers, the false signatures." He looked at Leonard. "You know how this works?" Leonard didn't fight. He didn't even speak. He just looked at me. That same look of disbelief men give when they realize the woman they underestimated is the one holding the sword. As they cuffed him, Rena sobbed, "Please, Mom, I didn't mean to—" I cut her off. "Intent doesn't erase action." When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent again. For a long time, I stood there, staring at the space where they'd been, not because I missed them, but because I needed to remember the shape of their absence. Then I sat down at the table, the papers still scattered before me, and whispered to no one in particular, "It's done. It's finally done." But I was wrong. Because justice isn't complete until it's understood, and Rena, she wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I received a call. Unknown number, a voice trembling on the other end. "Mom, they're saying he's blaming me for everything. I didn't know he'd—" I interrupted. "Rena, stop. You both built this. You just didn't think it would collapse." She cried softly. "Can I come home?" "No," I said. "You already did, and you burned it." I hung up. The quiet afterward wasn't peace. It was rebirth. because the truth had finally unfolded, not to destroy me, but to remind me, when you stop chasing love from those who feed on your forgiveness, you start loving yourself in a way that terrifies them. And that was my real justice. The morning after Leonard's arrest, the world didn't look any different. The sun still rose, the kettle still whistled, and my reflection still wore the same calm face I'd perfected for years. But inside, something had shifted, quiet and irreversible. People think revenge feels like fire. It doesn't. It feels like frost, cold, clean, deliberate. By noon, the news had spread through the neighborhood. "Businessman arrested for fraud," the headline said. They didn't mention my name. I made sure of that, because true power doesn't need credit. I thought that would be the end of it. But endings never come clean when guilt still has breath left in it. Around dusk, I heard a knock on the door. Soft, hesitant, familiar. When I opened it, there she was. My daughter, Rena. She looked smaller, like guilt had carved inches off her height. Her eyes were swollen, her lips trembling. "Mom," she whispered, "please. I didn't know he'd do that to me." I studied her quietly. The same girl whose hands I once held crossing streets. The same girl who now stood on the porch like a stranger asking for shelter. "Come in," I said, voice flat. She stepped inside, eyes darting to the living room where her stepfather's shadow still lingered. "He told them everything," she said quickly. "Said I helped him forge the papers. Said it was all my idea." "Wasn't it?" I asked calmly. She flinched. "Mom, no, I was scared. He said if I didn't help, you'd lose everything." I took a slow breath. "And now I've lost you." Her tears fell then, splashing onto the floor like confessions. "Please, I didn't mean to hurt you. You thought you were smarter," I interrupted. "You thought you could play both sides and walk away clean." She sank into the couch, hands shaking. "You don't understand, Mom. He said you'd never forgive me." "He was right," I said. Silence stretched between us, the kind that fills entire rooms. Then I spoke again, voice softer, sharper. "I raised you to be strong, not cruel. I gave you everything your father couldn't, and you gave it away to a man who saw you as a transaction." She started to protest, but I lifted a hand. "Don't. You've already said enough. You didn't just betray me, Rena. You betrayed the woman who taught you what loyalty meant." Her shoulders shook, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the child she once was. But pity is a luxury betrayal doesn't allow. She whispered, "Can I stay here until I figure things out?" I looked at her, the bruised pride, the trembling voice, the ghost of innocence. "No," I said quietly, "you can't." Her eyes widened. "You'd turn me away?" "I already did," I said, "the day you chose his side over mine." She covered her face, sobbing. "I don't have anyone else." I nodded slowly. "Maybe that's how you learn who you really are." She stood up then, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're heartless," she spat. I smiled faintly. "No, baby, I just stopped being your fool." She turned for the door, hand trembling on the knob. Before she left, she said, "You'll regret this." I replied, "I already did for years." The door closed behind her, not with anger, but with finality. I walked back to the kitchen. The teapot was still warm. Steam rose like a ghost, curling into the air, vanishing without sound. I poured myself a cup, steady and slow. The same ritual, but it felt different now, sacred. Because that was the moment I realized something simple and terrible. I didn't lose a daughter. I shed a parasite. And sometimes losing is just what winning looks like before it's understood. I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through me. My reflection in the window looked older, colder, freer. The storm outside had passed, but inside, a new stillness had begun. Not peace, not yet. That would come later when justice finished its quiet work, But for now, I let the silence settle. Because silence, when earned, is the loudest victory of all. Justice doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears a silk robe, pours tea slowly, and lets the world discover its own sins. After Leonard's arrest and Rena's departure, I didn't tell anyone the details. The neighbors whispered. The church ladies speculated, and my bridge club leaned closer every time I said, "It's been a season." But I never gave them the truth. Not yet. Because revenge loses flavor when you serve it too fast. I let time do the talking. The first step was reclaiming my name. Leonard's company had accounts under Whitaker Holdings, all frozen by the state. So I opened a new one, May L & Co. Same initials, new meaning. The woman they underestimated now owned the business they built with her money. Curtis helped me navigate every inch of paperwork. He laughed as we signed the last document. "May, you just outplayed 2 con artists without breaking a nail." "Oh, I broke something," I said, just not what they expected. The second step was exposure, not in a court, in a mirror. I arranged a small charity gala, one Leonard used to host every year in my name, but never gave me credit for. This time, it was mine. Every invitation hand-delivered. Every guest chosen carefully. Bankers, partners, a few local reporters, and yes, Rena. I knew she'd come. People like her can't resist a stage. The night of the gala, the hall shimmered. White lights, gold drapes, the kind of elegance that makes betrayal look cheap. I wore emerald, the color of envy, renewal, and money. My head bandaged lightly still, a reminder of survival disguised as style. When Rena arrived, she froze at the door. She looked lost, fragile, wearing the same necklace Leonard once bought her, the one she used to flaunt like a badge. "Mom," she whispered, "you invited me?" "Of course," I said. "Family should witness history." She smiled weakly, unsure if it was kindness or cruelty. It was both. I took the stage near the end of the evening, tapping the microphone gently. "Good evening, everyone," I began. "Thank you for being here to celebrate a new chapter." The room quieted. I could feel Rena's eyes on me, nervous, searching. "I've learned," I continued, "that family is not defined by blood, but by integrity. And sometimes it takes losing both to find peace." A murmur rippled through the crowd, just enough to stir curiosity. "I also learned," I said softly, "that truth, like tea, must be brewed slowly. Let it steep too long, it turns bitter. Serve it too soon, it's weak. But tonight, it's just right." The projector behind me flickered to life. Photos appeared. Charity records, financial transfers, board signatures, not scandalous enough for court, but detailed enough to whisper ruin. Rena gasped. A few people turned to look at her. The whispers began, quiet slicing. I kept speaking, never raising my voice. These documents represent what happens when trust is misused, but also what happens when one woman refuses to stay silent. Applause broke out, hesitant, then full. Rena's face turned pale. She stood, shaking slightly. "Mom, please." I looked straight at her. "Sit down, Rena, I'm not finished." The crowd fell silent again. "I don't expose to destroy," I said. "I expose to reclaim, because forgiveness without truth is just permission for repeat offenses." Her eyes filled, and for the first time, I saw genuine shame, raw, unfiltered. That was my victory. After the gala, people came up one by one, handshakes, compliments, polite curiosity. But I watched Rena slip out the back, shoulders trembling, disappearing into the night that matched her choices. That was enough. Justice doesn't need witnesses. It just needs weight. The next morning, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. It read, "Mom, I'm sorry. I've gone away for a while. I need to fix myself before I can face you again. Thank you for teaching me what strength really looks like. Even when I hated you for it. No signature, No promise, just a confession written in shaking ink. I folded it carefully and placed it in my jewelry box, right beside the flash drive. Because some truths deserve to be kept, not displayed. Weeks passed. The paper said Leonard's trial was set for summer. His name trended once, then vanished. Mine stayed untouched. Exactly how I wanted it. I started volunteering again, hosting small groups for women who'd survived manipulation and betrayal, each story different, each pain familiar. And every time they asked, "How did you survive?" I'd smile softly and say, "I stopped asking why they did it and started remembering who I was before they did." That line always landed like truth does, quiet but permanent. By spring, the garden bloomed again. Roses, lilies, lavender. I trimmed them every morning, scissors steady, heart lighter. And sometimes when the wind carried faint laughter from the street, I'd whisper, "You hear that, Leonard?" Even the flowers came back stronger. Because revenge, in its purest form, isn't fire or fury. It's rebuilding, beautifully, visibly. So the ones who broke you must live long enough to see your peace. And that's what I did. Piece by piece, brick by brick, tea by tea. Justice served cold? No, justice served calm. The months that followed felt like breathing after years underwater. Not victory, not even relief, just stillness. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be earned anymore. It simply is. Leonard was behind bars by June. The paper said he took a plea. No trial, no grand defense, just resignation. His lawyer called once, said he wanted to send an apology. I told him to save the postage. Some words weigh too little to travel this far. Rena wrote again in July, shorter this time. "I'm working at a bookstore upstate. It's quiet here. I've stopped wearing jewelry. I thought you'd like that." I didn't reply. Forgiveness is something I believe in, but not as charity. It has to be earned, like grace. The house feels bigger now. Not emptier, just honest. Every room holds echoes of who I used to be, but not the ghosts of what I tolerated. Some mornings, I sit on the porch with my tea, the same cup I've used for decades. Small chip on the rim, handle smooth from memory. I stir honey into it, slow and deliberate, the same rhythm I used when pretending life was fine. Only now, it really is. Neighbors wave when they pass. They say, "You're glowing these days, May." And I just smile, because peace looks a lot like glow when it's hard-earned. The tea's steam curls upward, soft and forgiving, and I remember that everything, every bruise, every broken trust, every silence, led me here. I used to think justice was about punishment. Now I know it's about clarity, seeing people as they are, not who you hoped they'd be, and letting that truth set you free. One quiet morning at a time. Sometimes I wonder where Rena is now, if she's healed, if she's learned. But I never wonder why she did what she did, because I finally stopped giving pain the dignity of reason. At night, when the house hums low and the garden lights flicker, I pour a second cup of tea. One for me, one for the woman I used to be. We sit together in silence, two versions of the same soul finally at peace with each other. And I whisper to her, "You did good, May. You survived with grace. And that's more than they ever expected." The clock ticks steady in the background. No chaos left to count. No voices to silence. Just the quiet rhythm of life continuing, beautifully, deliberately, mine again. I glance at the letter from Rena once more before placing it away for good. The ink has faded slightly. The pain hasn't. It simply turned into wisdom. As I close the box, I murmur softly, "Sometimes peace isn't loud. Sometimes it's just choosing not to reopen old doors." Then I sip my tea, watching the first morning light spill across the floorboards, gentle, golden, forgiving. The world has finally stopped spinning too fast, and for the first time in years, I don't need revenge. I have something far better. Peace. my kind of justice. 5 years later. The house looks different now, lighter somehow. The walls don't hold secrets anymore, only sunlight. My roses out back bloom earlier every spring, as if the soil finally forgave the footsteps that once crushed it. I'm 71 now. My hands shake a little when I pour tea, but my aim's still true. Calm, steady, certain. I've learned that time doesn't erase pain. It just teaches it how to sit quietly beside you. And one day, you wake up realizing you don't hate the memories anymore. You just nod to them, like old neighbors who finally stopped knocking. Leonard never left prison. Last I heard, he found religion. I hope it gives him peace, the kind he tried to steal from others. Rena came back once, 3 years ago. Not to stay, just to say thank you. She looked older, wiser, humble in a way I'd never seen before. Said she was counseling women now, helping them leave men like Leonard before they lose themselves. I told her that's how redemption starts, when pain becomes service. We hugged, brief, real, unfinished, and that was enough. Now my mornings are quiet, my nights even quieter. Sometimes I sit on the porch swing with a blanket over my knees, watching the world keep its promises in slow motion. And when people ask if I ever regret anything, I tell them this: no, because everything I lost made space for who I became. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't break you, it refines you. Fire doesn't destroy gold, it reveals it. So when I sip my tea these days, I smile at the reflection in the cup. A woman who once thought survival was small and now knows it's the most elegant form of revenge. Sometimes being left behind is the fastest way to get ahead. If you've ever trusted the wrong people, if you've ever loved someone who mistook your kindness for weakness, this story was for you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your peace or your power. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. I love to know how far these stories travel.